Okay, so now I get to a part that's a little hard for me, especially towards the end. We are in Matthew 27, verse 11. Meanwhile, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. Then the Pilate asked him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. So all this time, Jesus has been silent. He's only answered a couple times, and it's to say, yes, it is as you say, and it's the exact same answer. So back in Matthew 26:64, the high priest says to him, "I charge you under oath by the living God." Of course, we said the irony there. "Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. But then, of course, he added a little bit more. Well, here, he's now talking to Rome, to the governor. And he says again, "Yes, as you say," but he doesn't answer the charges. So the charges that are brought, he doesn't answer, but he does answer when it's asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" So the Jews, again, we talked about they have to manipulate things. So the Jews are accusing Jesus for blasphemy by saying that he is God. But they can't, of course, use the same thing with the with Rome. There we go. So what they are using is they're accusing him of causing riots. By claiming to be king, then therefore it'll incite riots, and you don't want him to be claiming king, because then it can mess you up and take over your kingdom, so that's not good. Now with the Jews, though, they have not said until this point that he has claimed to be king, because before they were saying he's claimed to be God, and that's why they reacted the way they did. But here, because it's Rome, they have to use a different reason, and they say he's claiming to be king. It's going to cause riots. So you don't want to have that. And Jesus really only answers to the higher authority both times. The first time was the high priest when he gives an answer, and here to the governor when the governor talks to him. Now, it is ironic that Pilate was an incredibly vile, cruel, cagey. He had weak morals. He was very weak in character. He had no concern for truth and justice, yet he's the one that can't find fault in Jesus. He has every reason to, based on his character, to find fault in Jesus just because. Also because of the claim that he is claimed to be king. But Pilate doesn't see it. He finds no fault. And of course, that goes again with finding no fault with the inspection before. So there's no fault in Jesus. But Pilate perceives, when they get to Barabbas, Pilate perceives that Barabbas is a far more dangerous criminal. Now, understand too that Barabbas he also incited social unrest and riots. So you have two people right now that are before Pilate, and they are pretty much accused of the same thing, same crime. But Barabbas is far more dangerous, and he's very violent. So perhaps the persuasion that the chief priests had used with the crowd that they gathered, of course, we know that they got a mob to go and get Jesus, so they're using the same people. They're gathering some people together to kind of incite this, whether it be zealots that wanted to overthrow Rome. Maybe the persuasion was, well, you're wanting to overthrow Rome, and Jesus isn't going to get that job done. So Barabbas will. He's violent. He will get the job done. Maybe that was the whole persuasion that they used, the tactic. But the interesting thing is that they were both guilty of the same crimes. Barabbas was Jesus and Barabbas were both being accused of stirring up social dissension, of trying to overthrow Rome. But Jesus was not guilty of stirring up a riot. Barabbas was. But Jesus' sacrifice, because he took that place, Jesus' sacrifice stood in Barabbas' place. He took away that punishment that was supposed to be set aside that was supposed to be on Barabbas. But he took that punishment. He set Barabbas free. And the punishment that was due to Barabbas was now placed on Jesus. And that's exactly what he does for all of us. Now, Pilate was also under pressure from Rome already to keep peace in his territory. So the last thing he needed was for this rebellion to get out of hand. And the chief priests and all are quite irate about this. They're being persistent. So, well, the best thing to do is keep the peace in his mind. And it's over this quiet, insignificant, seemingly insignificant man. He didn't fully understand it, but whatever is basically his reaction. Now, when it says the elders persuaded the crowd in verse 20, that word there is oklos, which is witnesses of the trial. Those are everyone that are there present. That's including whether it be Romans and Jews. That's a combination of everyone. And that's important because in verse 25, it's a different word. So that crowd is both Romans and Jews. One more thing about Barabbas. Barabbas means Bar Abba, or son of father, or son of a human father. And then you have Jesus, who is the son of the heavenly Father. Now, of course, Pilate does not want anything to do with this. His wife warns him, and there's a phrase that they believed, and it says, "It is evidence that they have done no evil, for all activity takes place by means of the hands." So in their mind, that if he washes his hands, then he is free of any evil that has been done because he did not take part in this. His hands weren't on it. So therefore, he thinks he's innocent, which of course we know he's not. And he will suffer for it. There's a lot of things that go on in history that he ends up, it's just some bad stuff. Pretty much the prophecy his wife has in the dreams comes true, and he's destroyed. Now we go on down to verse 25, and the verse, all the people answered, that is Laos, instead of the other crowd. This is Laos. That means it's very Israel specific. So all the Israelites say, let his blood be on us and on our children, is very specific to the curse that would be upon Israel. Now there's a whole lot of debate as to if they are saying that, or if that's true, that there was a curse that was placed upon Israel because of that. It's one of those hard discussion points, or whether it was just on the priests and the elders that were involved in this decision. But moving on. Then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. Now, this is the part I struggle with because of the type of flogging they did. This was the word here is verbaratio. This was a capital sentence that preceded execution. And this is, so it was a cat of nine tails. It was a leather strap, and it had all these things tied to it, like bone, glass, anything that could rip flesh. And it would be tied to a whipping post, and they would do these lashes. And so it was literally ripped flesh off of the victim. Most people did not survive. There was understanding that there was a limit to 39 lashes because it was fatal. Most people died before you even got to that point, but there was a limit, especially if you were planning on doing another execution like the crucifixion, that you had to stop then. But it was so bad that their organs would actually be seen. You wouldn't, it would disfigure a person beyond belief. But the back would be open. When you think of just shredded, like a roadkill carcass, and you see it shredded after all these animals have been on top of it, that's exactly what it looks like. You could see bone. That's how horrible of a beating that Jesus went through. Sorry. But the intestines and everything else, you could see that much. It was absolutely horrible. Then you go into what took place right after this, and this is in John 19, 1 through 16. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. Now, this crown of thorns, we understand that these were a poisonous type of thorn. So they weren't just putting it on his head, they were beating it, and these were very, very thick, couple inch thorns, and they would beat it into his head, and it would cause his head to swell, on top of all the beatings and everything else. So when you look at the Shroud of Turin, which they've been proving that is far more real, you can actually see that this is a disfigured man who had been incredibly tortured, and that his face was swollen. So this is what's going on. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him in the face. And we'll get into verse 27 tomorrow, but this is kind of all tying together too. Overlaps. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jews insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." So now they're going back to their original claim. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priest answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. Okay, so let's get into the next part tomorrow, and we'll give a little bit more understanding behind all of this.